today I'm pleased to have Maurice Conti. He is a AI visionary, futurist, chief innovation officer, and global keynote speaker. Many of you are familiar with Maurice. He was our keynote speaker at CAMX and gave a fantastic overview of AI and some exciting things on the horizon. We're going to get into some of that discussion today. Maurice has worked with companies like Autodesk, Nike, Tesla, Disney, Mercedes, Airbus, the Navy SEALs, the government of Japan, and many others to help build the products and services of the future. As a futurist, innovative executive, and international keynote speaker, he has developed products and strategies and experiences to help companies thrive in our rapidly changing landscape. He has a blend of hands-on practitioner and big thinker. And I gathered that just from as you gave your introduction at the keynote, Maurice, and we'll get into that. But thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. It's a pleasure to have you spending some time today on the show.
Yeah, Jonathan, pleasure's mine. I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah. So let's start off. Many of our listeners were at the, they attended CAMX, they heard your keynote, but for some, I'd love to get, if you would, give kind of a quick overview of your background, because you do actually have a little background in composite or advanced materials. And it's kind of interesting that you're able to take that background experience and really relate that or mesh that with AI. But I want you to feel free to just start and share your background in the industry.
Yeah, so I definitely would not say that I have an extensive background in composites, given this audience. That advanced materials has just been a passion of mine since I was a little kid.
Sure.
My dad was a researcher at UC Berkeley, and they were building stuff out of composites that back then were, super exotic, and now, your golf club and your bicycle are made out of them. But when I was 9 or 10, I was just playing around with these things like carbon fiber and Kevlar and epoxies and so forth. But I sort of grew up as a designer. My brain is wired as a designer. I sort of look at the world that way, and did that for a while, but then transitioned to what was sort of labeled in the world as innovation. To me, that's just applying a design mindset to business.
Sure.
And ran innovation teams for a couple of big companies. And I kind of, AI is like all the rage today, and that's what I mostly get asked about.
Yeah.
And I kind of fell into that by accident, because as we were trying to do these innovative things and solve problems that had never been solved before, these were sort of big, sort of moonshot innovation programs. We kept coming to AI as the only way to solve these problems. And so, this is more than a decade ago, well before the hype. We found that AI was our only tool that was going to get us to where we wanted to go. And so we started building AIs to help us do that. And then, ever since then, we were kind of early on the generative AI thing. I gave a talk at TED more than a decade ago now. Or no, just a little under a decade ago, and predicted a lot of what's happening today, sort of remarkably accurately. And since then, my focus has largely been on AI and how it can help companies, do things that they've never been able to do before.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of people think that AI is kind of new, but it goes back a ways, right?
Yeah, I mean, technically, AI started about 70 years ago, 70 years ago, and it's been, a long, hard slog. And I think, back in November of 2022, which is when OpenAI released ChatGPT to the public, there was sort of a step change there because of the wide availability. Suddenly, everybody on the planet had access. That access was free. You just needed a smartphone or a laptop and an internet connection.
Sure.
And generative is interesting because it can, it can sort of you can throw problems at it that it has never seen before. So previously you would sort of, use machine learning to kind of go deep on a particular problem that was very well defined, and you would use an algorithm to solve that problem. But generative, you can just kind of ask it things that it has never been asked before.
Right.
and it'll deliver useful results. So I think this new branch in the evolutionary tree of AI is
Yeah.
is really interesting.
Yeah, and you mentioned ChatGPT. I know that seems to be the starting point with a lot of people who are getting their first taste of it. I mean, I guess my question, people that are dipping their toe into the world of AI, where do you suggest typically that they start if they're if they're at a starting point? Are there specific areas or processes that you recommend that people start with? Because I mean, there's a lot of platforms. There's,
Right.
we're all familiar with ChatGPT, but you see all these spinoffs now, and you see other. I'm sure that there's other competing platforms and other technologies out there that are being developed even as we speak. So,
Yeah.
from your standpoint, when you're having that conversation, where do you suggest that people start with if they're just beginning, or companies that are just beginning their venture into this?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot. I can barely keep up with
Yeah,
with the weekly developments,
sure.
and I do this for a living, and in fact, in some ways, have sort of given up on trying to keep track of everything that's brand new.
Yeah.
Um, and sure, you mentioned ChatGPT. We've been talking about that. Yeah, today I think that's the best all around frontier model.
Hmm.
That would be a shortcut, is like just go to ChatGPT
Yeah.
and sort of the family of products around that that OpenAI has.
Right.
GPT 4.0 is largely the best.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's
continues to improve. I mean, it's from 3.0 to 4.0 is just
yeah,
significant change.
yeah, absolutely. And the multimodality, which is sort of being able, you can type to it, you can talk to
Yep.
it, you can show it pictures, you can show it
Yeah.
videos.
Right.
It's really pretty impressive. I think the one, if I could give one piece of advice,
Mm-hmm.
that would be, just get your hands on it.
Sure.
It's easy to talk about it. It's easy to read about it. It's actually easy to get your hands on it. Again, it's free. It's a very friendly and easy interface. And
Right.
I think if you haven't played with it and you spend 20 minutes, half an hour using it, you will be sort of 85% as much of an expert on AI as I am.
Yeah.
Like, I'm only that much better than someone who's used the thing for 30 minutes.
Sure.
Because I think, what'll happen is you'll kind of come away and go, oh, that's what all of this hype is about. Like, now I get it.
Yeah.
It's amazing at this. It's terrible at doing this. Like, I
Right.
couldn't, get it to do that.
Yeah.
And so it kind of resets the understanding, the expectation of what this thing is today and could be tomorrow. So, like, the number one thing, you can forget about everything else I'm going to say. If you haven't, get your hands on it.
Yeah.
And spend 20, 30 minutes. And I would say those 20 or 30 minutes, work with it on a real problem that you
Mm-hmm.
have, like a real challenge, not, give me some ideas for my 10-year-old's birthday party, especially if you don't have a 10-year-old.
Sure.
Or, give me a recipe for such and such. Like, it'll do a good
Yeah.
job at that. But
Yeah.
that is what I would call IBNU, like interesting but not useful.
Yeah.
So, approach it with a document that you're drafting,
Sure.
that is tough and you're sort of stuck, or a really tough email to your boss, or from an angry customer, something like that,
Mm-hmm.
because that'll show you what it can actually do in your real life, and it
Yeah.
gets away from this kind of theoretical, like, oh, it planned a wonderful 10-year-old's birthday. It's like, okay,
Right.
that's not useful to my business, right?
No.
So,
No.
that would be my sort of biggest piece of advice, is just get hands-on with a real
Yeah.
problem, and work with it rather than asking the AI to do it. So ask the AI to do it with you,
Yeah.
rather than for you. This is a collaborative conversation.
Sure.
It's not, you're not outsourcing something to the AI. That's
Right.
where lots of bad stuff happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And that's a good segue. From a work standpoint, what are you seeing? I mean, companies that are out there that are using generative AI to enhance the workplace. What are some application specific, to those companies that you might be able to share, just where they're using it effectively in their workspace to make things more efficient, to help their workplace, maybe not completely replace people, but and we'll get into that topic, but at least help the workflow within that organization.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I was just at an event yesterday.
Yeah.
And this was a workshop for executives in customer service.
Mm-hmm.
And so customer service as an industry is the tip of the spear in terms of AI deployment in business. Like, these folks are actually doing it. They're actually living it, and they're the first to do so in the world.
Right.
Because these technologies, generative AI is particularly well suited to what they do for a living, day in and day out. And so they are the first industry to be disrupted. They are, they're reorganizing. They're coming up with new skills requirements. There's consolidation happening in the industry. I mean, it's actually quite amazing. It's a little bit like, William Gibson has this quote: "The future's already here. It's just not widely distributed." And just seeing, spending the day with them and kind of getting a snapshot of their situation, that is a portal into the future of what's going to hit the rest of us. And they're deploying kind of a wide range of technologies, things from chatbots we're all familiar with, co-pilots, and I don't mean Microsoft Copilot. This is a generic term.
Right.
So this is literally a co-pilot, like someone who is next to you, helping you do things. A subset of that is called Agent Assist. They're using it for analysis, everything from sentiment analysis to, analyzing other parts of the data that they gather. QA. So sort of assessing the performance of their agents, workforce management, analytics. So kind of across the board, CS and CX organizations are in the thick of it.
Yeah.
And getting some really interesting early results in terms of efficiency and deflecting or handling, especially tier one, like the easy stuff that customers call companies for. Those are just being handled entirely by AIs today. The other thing I would I've been thinking about is agentics or agentic AI. This is basically an AI that can do things on its own without human intervention. So, a simple example would be, look at my calendar. I'm giving a talk in New York next week. Deal with my flights.
Yeah.
And it would find the best flight. It knows my preferences and would actually, has my access to my credit card, would actually book me a ticket at the right time and so forth. That would be an AI agent. So those are that's kind of the latest thing. And those are starting to take off. They're much more useful because they actually do stuff.
Sure.
Whereas the AIs, we have today or previously don't really do anything. They talk with you, but they can't do anything.
Right.
And then the third area would be like learning and development, training. So, and interesting. So, in big organizations, there's a lot of energy put into, learning and development. What's interesting is now part of that learning development is to help employees deal with the disruption of AI. So, as part of my job is being automated, I need to learn new skills, and we're using AI to teach those skills. So that's kind of an interesting dynamic, right? AI is it's not taking jobs. It's sort of offsetting tasks. So the AI is taking some of your tasks, and it's going to help you learn how to do new stuff to stay relevant.
And really, that's the way I look at AI is really making our work life more efficient and better. But you have to address a lot of concerns out there with people or within organizations that say, this is going to take jobs. This is going to, this is, I mean, there's all sorts of different, attitudes towards that, from the extreme that's like, this is going to be like Skynet to,
Right.
and I'm sure you've heard that too,
Yeah.
to people are just concerned. I mean, is this going to replace, what I do? And I'll give you a personal example of that. I've got a son in college currently. He was going to major in computer science, but he shifted to electrical engineering for the reason that he thought, well, AI could be replacing a lot of programmers, in the next, 10 years, maybe earlier than that. But there is that attitude of, okay, is my job going to be relevant, in the next 5 years? And how do you handle that? How do you handle that perspective?
Yeah. So that's a great example with a young person
Yeah.
trying to plot a course for the future, right?
Yeah.
They want to be relevant at
Sure.
10 years from now.
Right.
So look, Jonathan, I think you have to, it depends on how far you're zoomed in or out.
Yeah.
If you zoom way out in terms of sort of geography and time, in the future, the net result will be, I think, if you ask me to predict, would be there are more jobs rather than fewer jobs. And those jobs are in aggregate of higher quality. They're better paying, they're
Sure.
less tedious, more creative, and so forth. This has certainly been the case with all of the big disruptive technologies that have hit us historically.
Hmm.
Steam power, electricity, agriculture,
Right.
what have you. And I think this is on that order. It is that significant.
Yeah.
So that's zooming way out. If you start to zoom in closer and closer, I'll go back to this example of customer service, because I think they are not only being disrupted first and earliest, but also are going to be among the industries that are disrupted most, dramatically or violently.
Right.
Some of those jobs are going to go away.
Hmm.
It's going to take longer than people think, because even and this meeting was here in San Francisco, which is the epicenter of AI globally. And even in the room, there were probably about 70 companies there. There were maybe 2 or 3 who had sort of fully implemented AI workflows
Hmm.
in their CS organizations. Um, the bulk were kind of working on it and experimenting and had some partial deployments, and then there was another small group that hadn't done anything yet.
Yeah.
And so that's already 2 years in, and you only have a small percentage that are deployed, and this is the tip of the spear. So you can see it easily taking 10 years. During that 10 years, some of that workforce is going to age out.
Sure.
Some of that workforce is going to reskill and find other jobs. So already you're just talking about a subset
Yeah.
whose jobs will be displaced. One of the most interesting things I heard in the room was, oh, we just hired a bot manager. So this is a human
Yeah.
whose job it is to manage all of the bots, because it is a thing that needs to be looked after. It's not
Right.
a platform that just gets turned on. These are kind of, I don't want to say living and breathing, but they're dynamic systems, and they need to
Hmm.
be looked after. And so there's a new job, and this is typical in these cycles, is new jobs appear to replace older jobs. Now,
Absolutely. Yeah.
that one bot manager is maybe replacing 10 customer service agents, but these new things do appear. The other thing is, it's this notion of kind of customer expectations. And so if you, and this may not be as applicable in the advanced composite space, because it's not really a consumer business,
Right.
but if it's a highly consumer facing thing, the consumer's expectations, but even your customers as a composites company, your customers' expectations are going to go up with your capabilities. And so if I'm a customer and I expect an answer to my inquiry right away, and it's dead right, and it makes me feel good, and so forth, and your competitor can deliver that experience because they're using AI,
Yeah.
now that's table stakes for you, and that tends
Sure.
to require the same number of humans. They're just operating at a higher level. They're able to deliver more in less time. So,
Yeah.
net, I'm really optimistic on this. I think this is generally from a workforce perspective, this is a positive thing. In thinking about the composites industry, this is a very physical, by definition, your product is a thing, right? It's not
Yes.
code, it's not
Right.
abstract.
Right.
Um,
And it
and so,
requires a personal presence in many situations because you're physically running tests and
exactly.
yeah. So I mean, it's hard to imagine a time where that personal approach would go away in an industry like this. But as you mentioned earlier, from a integrating that into a company's website, so to speak, when customers or clients have questions that they need answered right away. There's opportunities there to integrate technology like that.
Exactly. I don't. So I love the way you put that. So that personal touch.
Yeah.
Not only do I think that's not going away, I
Yeah.
think that people will expect more and more of that
Absolutely.
because the non-personal stuff is being handled by machine systems, right?
It will.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
I want even a more personal kind of VIP experience,
Yep.
and even that personal interaction is going to be augmented by AI in a variety of different
Sure.
ways. So if I'm sending you an email,
Yeah.
and it's me, and that's kind of it's not face to face, but it's it's conversation between two humans.
Yeah.
That's going to be intermediated by AI. Like, I'm not going to be misspelling things anymore in my email.
Absolutely.
If I'm grumpy because it's early here in California, it's going to take that grumpy edge off of my email.
Right. Right.
And so forth.
So I'm curious with, we're seeing rapid advancement. What is your advice for industry leaders out there who are looking to, invest in technology or invest in talent out there for the future? I know that's always top of mind for many executives. All right, what are we looking at? Where should what talent pool should we be targeting? Um, Obviously we want to look to people that know the technology, understand it, are coming out of school with an understanding. I know it's encouraging to see many, universities out there are adopting this technology so students are well educated when they come out, when they graduate in this. But I'm just curious, where do you see, what is your advice for companies out there that want to invest?
Yeah, I have two kids in college, or one that just graduated.
Yeah.
And their friends are certainly using this technology to get through school.
Sure.
I don't want to throw them under the bus, so definitely their friends. And it's interesting. I was having a conversation with my son the other day,
Yeah.
and he was saying, "Boy, I wish," because this stuff came out sort of halfway through his college
Yeah.
stint, and he's like, "Oh, I wish I was starting school now,
Mm-hmm.
so that on day one, these tools were available to me." And
Mm.
he says, "I would have learned how to use them even better."
Right.
I mean, he's quite savvy, but I would have learned how to use them even better, and it would have been easier for me to get through school. I said,
Yeah.
"Well, but then you wouldn't have learned the things you learned by going to class and listening to professors. Like, I didn't learn anything from that anyway." And he went to a tier 1 university, and
Sure.
I
Yeah.
was like, that's not the stuff I learned. That's not how I learned it. I learned it through other, in smaller sessions and doing projects and so forth. All that to say, I think we are very quick, like culturally, we caught up very quickly to this technology. And yeah, everyone coming out of school today is fluent in in this technology. And this is one of the other cool things about generative is it is about fluency. It's not about technical proficiency. I'm not a computer scientist, and I use the stuff all the time for to very positive effect. So it's like learning another language, but not in the way that like learning code is another language. It's because you're still speaking, English or French or Swahili, whatever it
Sure.
is.
Right.
It's learning how to talk to this person who's a little bit weird, and sometimes doesn't understand you, and occasionally has a brilliant response to your conversation. So, good news is you've got this wave of folks who are just this is native to them and normal, and they're fully steeped in it. for those of us who are, not growing up right now, at least professionally, maybe in our heads we still are, but um, what I would say is, because this is paralyzing a little bit to organizations like, oh my gosh, everything's going to change. This is huge. I have to,
Absolutely. Yeah.
disrupt myself, or I'm going to
Hmm.
be disrupted, and so forth. Yes, but the kind of kung fu on that is, to start small. And so I work with leadership teams on this all the time, and starting small is counterintuitive for a couple of reasons. One is what I just mentioned, is like this is a huge thing, and so we need to have a huge approach to it. And the other is that, like in corporate culture, you don't want to go in front of the leadership team and go, "Look at this little tiny thing I did," right? You,
Yeah.
you want to like, "Da-da! Look at this amazing, huge success we had."
Right.
And that's the wrong approach, I think,
Oh
with
yeah.
this.
Yeah.
The right approach is, start small. In fact, start as small as you possibly can. Like there's this discipline of defining the smallest next step that you can take that is useful in some way. So
Yeah.
start as small as you can. You know, some of these companies are talking about, well, do we need to build a center of excellence? And so, sure, have a center of excellence of one, and just see who wants to volunteer to be a little bit the AI guru, and who
Sure.
spends some time, um, a part of their time, just digesting this technology and starting to experiment with it, and then that person sort of shares more broadly. Um, Another bit of advice. So that's the first one, is like you
Hmm.
have to get hands on,
Yeah.
and do that in the smallest possible way, and then build on that, build on that.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of companies are setting up AI advisory boards,
Hmm.
just to get kind of coaching from the outside. I sit on a couple of such boards, and it's easy. There's no risk to it. It's not super expensive, and it really helps you navigate. So that's kind of a low hanging fruit.
Hmm.
Um, and a lot of it is about what not to invest in, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of companies are struggling with, oh, geez, we need to go big in this area. That's a lot of money for us.
Right.
And someone could come in and go, you know what, forget it. That's that whole thing. Just,
Yeah.
forget about that. Really, the opportunity is 180 degrees off
Sure.
in this direction. So I am seeing, again, because it's early, a lot of sort of efforts that are wildly off the mark, not just a little bit.
Right.
And so those are easy to correct with a minimal amount of expertise. Um, I think the most important thing is, be darn clear on the problem that you're trying to solve.
Sure.
I can't stress that enough.
Yeah.
That is a very simple idea. Just be clear on the problem that you're trying to solve with AI. I spend a remarkable amount of time, trying to get leadership teams to actually do that. And if you are very clear, then I think a lot of the rest just kind of, all the other pieces kind of click into place, and you have a much more clear way forward.
Yeah.
So that would be like, first big takeaway is get your hands on the stuff, as practically as possible, and the second is be very, very clear on the problem that you're
Yeah.
trying to solve. These are not general purpose technologies. Like you can't throw AI at a
Right.
problem. Like, how do we make our shop floor 20% more efficient? AI
Right.
is not going to do that for you.
Yeah.
Um, a bunch of humans are going to figure out how to do that. They're going to use AI to help them,
Yeah.
but AI cannot solve such a diffuse problem.
No, and that's good because that really answers, my next question, which is how do you advise, companies out there? How do you measure success? Or what are your metrics that you in place? But if you're specific, like you say, if you're using it specific within your company to solve a specific objective, then that's clear. I mean, you set the success or the return on investment based off of, hey, are we solving this issue?
Yeah, exactly. I think this question about KPIs,
Yeah.
is a good one. And the KPIs that you might determine for any particular project vary widely depending on where in the org and what it is. So,
Yeah.
that the very question of, what KPI should we put in place for AI, I think kind of shines a light on the biggest misunderstanding or mistake about AI. Like, there is no AI KPIs.
Right.
It's a little bit like saying, what are the KPIs for your humans? Like, well, I don't know. That depends which human,
Right.
what they're doing, and so
Exactly.
forth. And it
Exactly.
like exactly like you said, Jonathan, it goes back to this being, if you're clear on the problem that you're trying to solve,
Yeah.
then your KPIs are going to be self-evident, right?
Yeah.
That's all just going to be obvious.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. It's very specific. It's not a broad approach. You're not painting this is not a broad stroke of a brush. You're very clear and specific and tackling very specific issues.
Yeah, that's right.
So next question, what strategies do you suggest for balancing AI innovation with risk management, and maybe how can companies assure that they're harnessing AI responsibly while also pushing the boundaries of what they want to achieve?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that's an innovation question, not an AI question, right?
Yeah.
Which makes it a very interesting question and a worthwhile one.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. I have this. Let me ask you, Jonathan. What does R&D stand for?
Research and development.
Hey, wrong. No, of course that's right. But I have a different framework where R&D stands for risk and determinism.
Okay.
And it is all about how do you innovate or how do you mitigate risk and still be innovative. So
Sure.
Think of your organization
Yeah.
as having two parts,
Right.
a deterministic side and a risk-taking side. And the deterministic side, like, you don't want to fool around with that. That's like, people need to get paid on time.
Yeah.
Product needs to meet quality standards. Customers need to, their needs need to be met according to their expectations. Like, you don't, my favorite one is like, you don't screw around with payroll. Like, you don't experiment. Let's try this new way.
Yeah. Right.
And oops, no one got paid this week. So that's the deterministic side. It's highly risk averse, and that is as it should be. And then there's the risk-taking part of the business that is designed to take risks. It's populated with humans who are trained to take those risks.
Mm-hmm.
It is much smaller than the deterministic side. Again, it could be one person, could be a handful of folks. And what happens is, you have a team that actually knows how to take risks productively,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're not about, even though we're calling it risk, that's not what they're about. They're about innovation. They're about achieving something new,
Right.
having a new impact. But you have to take risks in order to do that. So they're good at doing that stuff because you've hired and trained the team. It is incented for risk taking. So everything is sort of flowing in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's small, let's say that they want to innovate on this thing, they take some risks and they fail. What happens to the deterministic side of the business? Nothing. No one even notices on the deterministic side, right? Because it's small. It's a relatively tiny investment. So this group takes a risk, fails, impact basically zero. The same group takes a risk, succeeds. The impact on the deterministic side could be humongous, right? If it's a thing. So thinking about mitigating risk, and this applies to all innovation endeavors, but especially AI. The second is, we talked about taking small steps. There's something else you need, and that is a big vision. And Jonathan, you were asking about sort of the fear inside the organization about AI and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the best things that can be done is a clear vision for what AI means for your organization coming from leadership.
Yeah.
So this crystal clear vision, clear communication, and then so that's top down, and then bottom up, it's taking those little steps.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good way to mitigate risk in terms of innovation, and also mitigate risk sort of organizationally and culturally.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the last question I have, and this, we've touched on this, but I want to talk about what organizations should be looking at in terms of their people? What kind of skills do they need to be bringing or focusing in on when it comes to AI? How do you see AI changing or reshaping the skill sets of people within the organization, or I say enhancing those skill sets to make them better? And what do they need to be focusing on? You've already mentioned, hey, start with ChatGPT. Get yourself familiar with that at the beginning. The ChatGPT 4.0. That's a great place for anyone to start at any level within an organization and explore how you can use that. But how do you see that in terms of enhancing skill sets, and then also what do they need to focus on? It's hard to, when everything's so rapidly developing, you don't know what to, it's hard to kind of pinpoint one thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. And Jonathan, you used a word that that I think was great, which was enhance.
Enhance. Yeah.
And I think that's spot on. That's a big part of what generative AI is all about, is enhancing the human's capabilities.
Yeah.
Not replacing, I mentioned earlier, like don't ask the AI to do it for you, do it
Right.
with
Absolutely.
the AI. So it's not for, it's with. That is fundamentally important in terms of
Yeah.
mindset, like how to approach these technologies.
Mm-hmm.
Look, just as an individual, I would try and get clarity, and I would think a lot about what humans are good at and what AIs are good at. And so in
Sure.
order to do that second part, you need to be somewhat familiar with what AIs can and can't do. But if you have that clarity, suddenly the future gets a lot more predictable. Because you're saying, like, AIs are really bad at doing that, and this is something that's really easy for a human to do. So in the future, the human's probably still going to be doing that, right? It doesn't make sense to spend $1 billion to develop an AI that can do something that any human can do easily, without any training and at low cost.
Right.
So understanding those two things and understanding sort of the convergence of those, that's where the interesting things are going to happen. So I spend a lot of time thinking about that, and I think that's a good mindset to have.
Yeah.
In terms of skill sets, ultimately, the most valuable things are going to be curiosity and critical thought. That's, depending on where you sit on this philosophically, that's either very hard or impossible for a machine system to do.
Sure.
And so those particularly human qualities, I think, are going to be increasingly valuable. So if you have a kid coming out of college who's really good at thinking critically, they might not be able to spell anymore because the machine does that for them. They might not be able to write an essay start to finish without the help of an AI.
Yeah.
That doesn't matter as much as the critical thinking and the curiosity, right?
Yeah.
I think there are going to be some, I mentioned that the bot manager, which was a new one for me up until yesterday. So there are going to be some AI specific roles, both on the computer science side. So people working in the technology, but also adjacent. I think that's going to be exploding. So again, if you're curious, you're paying attention to this, and you'll be an early thinker and be able to make some decisions before everyone else. You'll sort of beat the market. Back to that thing, like, get hands-on, learn how to use these technologies in order to have a bigger impact in your job, in your company. That's part one. And part two is actually share that knowledge, because I think then you become a leader, you become a thought leader inside the organization. And now is this like magical moment where everyone's wondering and asking questions, and there's a lot of excitement around it. And it would be relatively easy compared to more sort of staid times to become a thought leader within the organization and get a lot of visibility. So
absolutely,
that's kind of with, what I would think about in terms of the skill sets of the future. I would sort of close that by saying this is a once in a generation opportunity. It is a big deal, and it's a big deal, and I really do see it primarily as an opportunity, not so much as a threat, not so much as a disruption, although it is going to disrupt. But in disruption, there's a huge opportunity. Second, I would say it's early days. This is new for everyone. Like, I'm supposed to be an expert. really, there's no one who has deployed AI at scale, generative AI at
Yeah.
scale, in business, and had a big impact. Like that hasn't happened yet.
Right.
It's sort of starting to happen. So everyone is new at this, which is why, companies like BCG and EY are hiring futurists like me to figure out their strategies,
Yeah.
because it's still future looking. There's no case study
Right.
yet.
Right.
So we're all, if this all feels new to you, we're all in the same boat, more or less.
Yes.
And so that means it's easy to get on the bus, because the bus is still sort of just pulling away from the station.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Later on, it's going to be cruising at 80 miles an hour, and you're not going to be running to catch
That's
up.
right. That's right.
And
No, I've got to follow up on that. I've got a friend who he's a copywriter, and he's done. I mean, he's written copy for a lot of major companies out there, major organizations, and he made a comment. This was about 2 years ago. He told me my job will soon be replaced, and I talked to him today, and he's getting more done with that. And I remind him of his comment every now and then that he made 2 years ago that he would be replaced. But in actuality, what's happening is he's getting more done today than he ever has been, and he's using it effectively because he's really understood the effective way of prompting for his business,
right,
for what he does. And it's accelerated his business so much that he's able to take on more clients. So his business has actually grown because of that. And so I find it really interesting, when going back to the fear that some people have of replacement, when I think that, as you said, you've got to get on board now, because this is the time to really be following it, studying it, using it like ChatGPT, so it can only enhance your skill sets.
Yeah, Jonathan, I'm not surprised to hear that story at all. In fact,
Yeah.
I imagine your friend is not only more productive and able to crank out more work, but the quality of that work is much higher than it was.
Yes. Yep.
Before. It's even more creative. Now the creativity comes from him,
right?
But he's got this new tool that helps him. It's like he was able to hire a junior co-writer.
Absolutely.
Except it's costing him $20 a month for a subscription to
exactly
to ChatGPT.
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
Maurice, it's been a pleasure having you on. I really do appreciate your time. How can people learn, our listeners learn more about how can they find you? First of all, we got your website pulled up. But if they have questions, want to get in touch with you, if organizations would love to have you to, reach out to you to speak or for consulting, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably easiest. It's Maurice Conti on LinkedIn. Okay. I'm happy to talk with folks and help. I do a lot of sort of AI strategy, like how do we think about this as an organization?
Sure.
What are our next steps? Where do we invest? Everything we've been talking about. There's a lot going on in that respect. So happy to continue the conversation with folks who are interested.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again. We'll be posting a link on our show page, and then obviously we'll be sending this out or sharing this next week. But we do appreciate your time today, and again, best of success to you. I know it's an exciting future in this industry, so it is for me. I think it's all about perspective. So
yeah. Jonathan, thank you so much for the chance to talk with you. I really had a great time.
Yep, you bet. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan.